Welcome to Canvas of the Heart, presented by Free Arts for Abused Children of Arizona. The mission of Free Arts is to transform children's trauma to resilience through the arts. This show is a collection of conversations that spotlight the ways Free Arts creates hope for children and teens who've experienced abuse, neglect, or homelessness. We hope you find this show to be informative, inspiring, and fun. Well, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Matt.
It's Canvas of the Heart. I'm messing up the podcast
What
name
is
in the
happening?
first episode.
Let's just start over.
3, 2, 1. All right, we're back with Canvas of the Heart. I'm joined by Jenna.
Hi, Matt.
As always, we'll stop the crowd noise. We got to keep them, orderly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a start of 2 important episodes we're going to talk about because we're spotlighting something that occurs in the month of May. So we're talking about Mental Health Month and 2 topics we think are both true for things at Free Arts in the way that we operate, but also of public interest in general. And so today we want to talk about stigma. And Jenna's come with the receipts on stigma.
Listen, we're going to go through all of it, talking about the history, how we got to this point. So yes, buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
Break it down.
So when we're talking about the history of stigma when it comes to mental health, I think some people might not realize just how far back the history goes. We're talking like ancient Greece, we're talking about ancient civilizations and how they viewed those who at the time, had suffering from mental illness, but they didn't know what it was. And a lot of that came from the thought of when you're seeing individuals who are maybe presenting like full-on symptoms, it was always thought of or tied to religion. So it was always that connection of, hey, this is demonic possession. That's one of the biggest things that they were accused of, is that they were being possessed by some evil spirit, some evil entity. Part of that was also saying that, it's, even though they didn't say your karma, you were cursed, whether it was you were cursed by God for something that you did as a severe punishment or a consequence or whatever if ancient civilization, the gods, plural, or someone else put a curse on you. Maybe they cursed you, they cursed your family. Maybe you're having these symptoms because of something that the generations before you did. So there were all these different thoughts as to why you weren't quote unquote normal. And when there were the thoughts of mental illness as being something that is to your detriment, to the detriment of society, when you have these all adverse views and perspectives on mental health, that is going to also affect your treatment of people who are suffering. And a lot of that resulted in isolation, being secluded. When we see it portrayed in the media, we see it with, this person upstairs in the attic, or this person downstairs in the cellar, away from, the general population, away from society. And because it was an embarrassment, it was shame. So even then, we're talking like centuries ago, even back then, we're talking about the level of shame that was associated with people who had mental illness. They were suffering with mental illness. And so then over time, they're looking for, what are the ways to treat it? And what are the ways to expel this demon out of you? What are the ways to release these spirits from you, or whatever it is? And so that's where the intersection of religion and different faith beliefs came in, and the consultation of shamans, or the consultation of priests, and exorcisms, and all of these other supposed treatments and modalities came as to how are you going to get this person to be normal, to be sane again. And that heavily influenced the practices and the treatments that were given. I mean, we have the research and the history that shows that you have individuals who had at the time, whatever the tools or mechanism whether they use, but were drilling holes in individuals' heads to release the spirits, and we're performing all kinds of experimental procedures, ways to force purging out of the body, because all of it was seen as there's something inside of you that needs to come out, and once it comes out, you'll be whole, you'll be normal. Mm-hmm. And so the history of mental health regarding the shame and the treatment has just gone on for so long in so many different societies. And so here we are today, though we understand we have so much more research, and we have so much more evidence that can really govern our perceptions and our treatment. We still haven't released ourselves from the shame that's associated with it.
Right. I mean, underlying it all, right, if you go back to like a pre-scientific way of trying to deal with what they saw in populations, we are branding mental illness as something that is outside of the normal, outside of the typical, yet it's commonplace in every culture. And it's likely that every family that we are talking to, every family member, and within their family is probably some history of mental illness. It's commonplace, yet we've also had an attitude of trying to eliminate it or trying to keep it secret. And we've used stigma as a way to do that. And it's been a powerful form of it, right? So I hear you saying that one of the ways that we've tried to do that is by excluding people, keeping them out of sight, keeping them away, or looking at it as in a pre-scientific way. We're not treating, we are trying to eject the spirit, see it as create some understanding of how we got here, and literally get this mood, this difference, this being, this thing that causes me to act this way, get it away from me.
Exactly. And when that doesn't work, or sometimes they don't even go that route, going back to the keeping you hidden, keeping you in isolation, they'll cast you in the same grouping as those who were considered the deviants of the community, the criminals. And so you're grouping them all together. And so when you look at, as time went on and recognizing we need hospitals for real treatment, look at the conditions historically that these institutions, how they existed. They were filthy. There was no type of accountability. You had individuals who were there, and abuse was rampant. Because this is a vulnerable population. Who's going to listen to you? Who's going to believe you that these wild, crazy evils are happening to you? And even think about down to the names. They were referred to as the loony bin. They were referred to as insane asylums. The madhouse. So even the terms that were used to describe the facilities themselves was giving some type of indication as to how these supposed treatment centers were even viewed. There was no lack of respect for the human person, because in most instances, are you even human? Or are you just flesh and bone, but with a evil spirit within you? So you are now even looking at you're looking at a situation where people aren't even seen as people; they're seen as less than and treated as such.
And that impacts the work that we do, right? Mm-hmm. So we are dealing with a population that often has labels attached to them, and so part of the reality is these labels can be helpful. They describe, right? It's hard to talk about mission and vision of why we exist without identifying the population. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to an individual, that's a different story. That power of labeling is a difficult thing for someone to have to cope with. When you go back to like what's an essential part of humanity, you go back to us as nomadic peoples around campfires. There's something true about our species that is still used today. And we have had a history of using a very simple thing to control behavior. And we use gossip.
Oh, yes.
So we use gossip. We talk about what someone else is doing, someone else is saying, and we might interject labels, not only just about individuals, but entire groups, right? And so I think it is helpful with one lens to look at how we use that dialogue with the very human interest in trying to control risk and danger. So how do we do that? We use gossip to warn. We use gossip to punish. Don't go by them. Don't go near them. Don't trust them. Right. Based on my opinion, that may or may not be accurate, but that is one form of how we do this. On a big macro scale, we still use gossip. We make billboards about it, and we put up a thing that we want you to do or not do. And we're based in Phoenix, in Maricopa County, and not too long ago, a couple decades ago, there was a very successful public health campaign that used stigma. So
really,
it was around.
Can you share? Because I'm not from here, so I didn't hear this.
Yeah, so I'm going to get it wrong. They wanted a jingle that you could remember, but they were trying to move down, and they were successful. So this is an important thing about stigma. There are places where it actually has some power that public health says we should do this.
Wow.
And it was with tobacco and the use of cigarette smoking. So there was a very concentrated media campaign about, I'm going to get it wrong, somebody in the audience will remember it, but smoking, tobacco is a smelly, pukey, disgusting habit. And they would have commercials of like people's teeth being altered and like how gross an ashtray is. And so what are they provoking when they show images like that?
Yeah.
Disgust.
Right.
It's a disgusting habit. You should consider doing it. And in our region here, smoking has dived. You cannot smoke in most public places, restaurants. I mean, I remember being a kid and being asked when you walk into the restaurant,
yes, smoking or non.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's gone, right? So in that way, the public campaign did tell people, and there might be smokers listening to us. They could probably tell us better than anybody. Yeah, they can tell us better about what it's like to try to navigate the world with this silent secret of, I smoke, and what that kind of campaign does to people. So that was a powerful campaign that worked. So our episode, however, is not, go stigmatize groups you don't like.
Right.
And
because that's the way to get what you want. No.
So people who researched this eventually figured out, because we've tried the same strategy with other things. So one that came about 15 years later was around weight. And if we talk about weight and being overweight in negative terms, it will motivate people to lose weight. Did not work.
No.
And so researchers are like, why did one work and why did the other not work? And so the interesting thing about the phenomena is that it seems that if the person who is experiencing the stigma language believes that the attribute that is being targeted is an essential part of who they are, it will only make their feelings more sad, more depressed, more detached, which often leads to the behavior that they're trying to alter.
Right, that's that personal stigma.
So smoking is different. It's an external behavior. They might say, I'm a smoker, but nobody thinks of themselves as a lit cigarette.
Right.
Right? And when you attack somebody's body image, much more personal story. And that labeling, that gossip, it actually ends up having very the opposite effect, deleterious effects on the interest in having people say, I should change this behavior. And I think now we're on the tail end, perhaps, of the response to that with fat acceptance, with people trying to promote being healthy at all weights, right. Health being the first concern. But that's all coming back from stigma. And we come back to our audience here, right? So we do trauma-informed art activities to children in out-of-home care. And so when people go like, what does that mean? Well, these children are often in foster care, in a kinship relationship with a family member. They might be adopted, or they might be experiencing homelessness, or they might be in a treatment center. Each of these are labels that, as we talk about it, are provoking powerful things in the audience. Mm-hmm. On a good day, it's motivating people to say, I want to help them. We have this entire operation of what we're doing is empowered by people who donate to us because they are motivated to help. Yet there's another side of it, right? there's a personal side to the people who hear these labels. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how public stigma and personal stigma intersect and how the labels that we use impact the people that we might be serving.
Right, because I think most people are very aware of the public stigma because, of course, that is with the collective, right? The collective perception on a particular topic or a particular feature, or in this case, with mental health. But when you're hearing these labels, like you mentioned, when you're the one that's actually having the experience, it's that feeling of, am I really like what is being said? That leads to helplessness. That leads to hopelessness, because if the stigma around someone who's experiencing homelessness is that, oh, you're lazy, oh, you're this, oh, you don't know how to provide for yourself, or maybe, the association of homelessness to substance use, maybe that connection, you start to wonder, am I these things? Am I what people say that I am? If it's connected to worthlessness, what is my sense of self-worth? And then as you're internalizing it, that's impacting your behavior. That's impacting all of your thought processes, and that's impacting your future and the choices that you make, the decisions you make, and the path that you choose to go down. So the power of public stigma is that it doesn't just end there with how you are viewing this person or this situation. It's how are they now becoming almost that self-fulfilling prophecy.
They're internalizing the message.
And now that's impacting them on a deeper level, which impacts their outcomes in the future. So therefore, you're also making it even more difficult for that person to get the help that they need, to find the assistance that they really need to really turn it around and switch up that narrative. And it's really hard for anyone to change the narrative that they tell, their own personal narrative, when everyone around them is saying something different. Everyone around them is treating them differently. Everyone around them is having poor conversations to and about them. And it's a really difficult thing to try to build somebody's self-confidence and self-esteem back up, and to show them and give them that hope factor that they will need, regardless of what challenge it is that they're currently going through or experiencing. So stigma never just stays public. It's always internalizes, and it changes the course direction of that person's life.
Yep. So that public, it sounds like that public perception becomes internalized, which makes it even harder to take any of the steps to affect their own future. I mean, we talk about here in the pyramid, right, self-efficacy, and it sounds like using that kind of language will really just cut that down in half, right?
Can you get it? Can you attain it? Because it's like, what do I have to offer in this space? Everything that I thought I could have been, I'm now being told I'm not.
Right. So let's be practical here. What does stigma that's not productive sound like? And to me, it sounds like a couple things. So even as I use the labels, right, children out of home care, it's different than that's a foster kid, or worse, a foster. Oh, he's a foster. She's a foster.
When did we start shortening the term even more?
Right. And because there's an association behind it that things are not as they should be or could be, right? And when we label someone like that with simply just a and word, right? We're cutting short the whole narrative about what's affecting them, and in some cases blaming and limiting them for things they have no control over.
Right.
And so that's how that shows up there. And then I purposely use people experiencing homelessness, right? Because that's probably the most pronounced label that's out there. The homeless, a homeless. And, at some point, there's no magic line where a person who is not homeless, right, is suddenly worthy of that label. It's something we give and project onto people because we're, at different times, all floating through different levels of our own like self-sustainability, resources, but to just completely define somebody by one label is not useful and contributes to the problem. I'm wondering how the words we use show up in your mind.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there, especially because when you're putting that adjective there or that descriptor there before the person, you're taking the person out of the center of the conversation and you're putting the situation or the circumstance at the forefront. And if we're looking at the individuals that we work with, or just anyone in general that we encounter in our society, we're people first. And the kids that we work with, the teens that we work with, our families, that's who the more important aspect of who they are. You're a child. And as a child, that's the human aspect. And when we decide that we're going to lead with your circumstance, how do we expect them to break beyond their circumstance? Because we're sending the message that that's how we view you. And that has such detrimental effects as well. And I don't know if anyone ever really took the time to realize something like that, that how we describe ourselves, the words that we use to describe ourselves, they matter. But is that all you ever want to be known as? Like think about to all of our listeners out there, think about maybe a trait or a quality or a descriptor that you really don't like. And what if that was the first thing that somebody ever said about you when they addressed you? What if that's the one thing that people use to identify you? And that's what a lot of our participants, they may experience, whether people realize it or not. And so the stigma around that starts with, how do you describe those that you see that are in your society, in your neighborhoods, in your communities? How do you view them?
And it's a practical tip. How do we put the person first in the label? So people experiencing things, children living in out-of-home care, right? We think about these mindfully to place the person first and not define them down to just one characteristic that they have no control over.
And it's really important for us to make sure that we put the experiencing homelessness or this was the experience that you had, because the word experience within itself shows that there's an end date. So it also gives some hope there as well. That experience was very challenging, but you could use past tense. It was challenging, meaning you overcame it. So really looking at that future focused language also, that it lets people know that this is not all that there is.
Yeah, and it's motivating to me because when I encounter a young person experiencing homelessness, I feel like that's a call to me to help. So they're not experiencing that anymore. Like It might be present, but you're absolutely right. We can move ourselves in the future where that's not true anymore.
Exactly. And the thing about experiences is that as we look at some of the other experiences that some of our young people, whether that's, well, not even just young people, all of our participants have experienced, those that are in our programs, they have all different types of experiences that affect their views, that affect the way that they view their situations as well as that of others. And so when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about the stigma of mental health, some of those experiences are related to our belief systems. And one of the common things that we've already kind of mentioned when we talked about the history is that intersectionality of mental health and the religious beliefs, especially of those in the BIPOC community. I remember being in my family, mental health wasn't something that you discussed because you were told the same thing no matter who you spoke to, whether it was, your mom, your dad, or so on, your auntie, your grandma, go pray about it. And it was something that's like, what do you even have to be depressed about? What do you even have to be sad about? And then it transformed into, but you don't even have any responsibilities. Like, what is it to worry about? So so then it just further continued to invalidate how you felt. And those are the more common mental illnesses and the common stigma that we see. So then imagine as the disorders become more severe and they present in really large ways. What is the response there? It's like, well, we need to carry you to church. We need to do this. We need to do that. And when you seek help in some of these families or in some of these communities where religion is prioritized, have you abandoned your faith? Have you turned your back on your faith? Why is it that you need this person? Or why didn't you just go and talk to the pastor?
Yeah.
The pastor is all that you need.
Yeah.
So it creates even more of a conflict within that person. So it's not just the issue that brought them to this circumstance that says, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I need help with. I know I need help. So I'm struggling with the fact that I already need help. But now you're telling me that I might be abandoning my belief system because I'm looking at professional help instead of spiritual health. Because there has to be a connection that because I'm experiencing mental health issues, that it's somehow connected to some type of disconnect or disharmony within my spirit or within my belief system. And it makes it very hard because then, especially members of the BIPOC community, is like, well, why can't the two coexist? Why can't I have my faith be fully well-rooted in my faith and my belief system while also seeking professional advice or assistance? It's the two can go together and can live as one, but a lot of members of the BIPOC community are forced to be in a situation where they have to choose one or the other.
It's a difficult choice, and you're touching on a really important topic because it's the stuff of slogans. I see it on T-shirts, right? Faith over fear. And it kind of makes you think like, sure, okay, I get it's a positive statement. Also, is there room to have both? Can you have both? Can you be believing in a better future while also having fear and then defining fear? This is from Tara Brach. I love how she talks about emotions. That our emotions, even the ones like anxiousness and fear, are life-loving life. Why do we feel afraid? Because we're got this body system that wants to keep us safe and healthy, and it's life-loving life. And so we're all about it here, about understanding that people have feelings, exploring them, giving room for them, and also giving room for demonstration of their faith at the same time. And then helping people see, like you're saying, this impacts some groups more than others. And that's something we wanted to bring up and to discuss as a way to be fair about it. So as we're getting to the end here, what are some things that we could advise our listeners and our viewers to do to kind of overcome and reduce the impacts of stigma that either they're experiencing or that they might be indirectly contributing to?
Yes, I'll answer that. And I also just want to plug in something really, really quickly, because I love how you brought up that whole faith over fear. There is such a thing as toxic positivity. Like that does exist. When you're just flooding it so much and you're not leaving space for the actual human emotions to be experienced, you're really crossing that line to toxic positivity. So thank you so much for bringing that up. But one of the first things we could do is to stop hiding behind the fact that it exists. There's one thing that it was a movie that I watched a while ago, and I can't recall the name of it. I think it might have been The Right with Anthony Hopkins. And one of the things that stuck with me is one line that says, just because you choose not to believe in the devil doesn't mean he doesn't exist. And taking the religion out of it, just because you choose to not believe or ignore mental health doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And we have to get out of that shadow or get out of that darkness that it's not there, that level of denial that some people live in, to say that if I just ignore it, it'll go away. And it won't go away. It won't just automatically get better on its own or resolve on its own. Whether that is going to seek professional help or using medication for more severe situations or just making necessary everyday lifestyle changes, something has to still happen. And that can only happen once we're talking about it and we're putting it to the forefront. And then we're also sending a message that this matters and that we recognize that it's there. So having the conversations to talk about it is important. And then when you start talking about it, what happens then? People have questions. Mm-hmm. And as the questions come up, you're providing space to provide the education. Mm-hmm. And so now we're giving people opportunities to learn more and to reshape their focus. Because a majority of the time when you look at it, a lot of the things that we're resistant to in every domain of our lives are things that we fear because we don't understand. And that lack of education keeps us crippled. That lack of education keeps us boxed in and keeps us from getting to where it is that we really want to be. And as a society, we owe it to ourselves and to our future, our posterity, to be able to say, hey, this is the lay of the land. This is the information here. This is what we can do about it. But each one teach one. Show somebody else. Tell somebody else what's happening. And when you're providing that education, it changes how not just how we perceive people who might be having challenges with their mental health, but it changes our approach to them as well. And so, and the thing is that it could easily be you on the other side one day. It can easily be you.
Yeah, have some humility about your life experience at the moment.
Right. Like you might be in a wonderful situation where, you feel good and you're like, well, I was about to say frolicking in the grass, but we're in Arizona. I don't see that happening too much. But you might be out there, I don't know, walking around with what do they call javelinas? I don't know. Do you walk with them? You run from them?
I think they're kind of angry as a whole species.
Well, then they see the stigma around mental health affects animals too.
Okay.
But it could easily be you on the other side of that. Yeah. And so that humility that you mentioned is extremely important. So
yeah, I think really quickly, it's helpful to think about that in terms of age groups because we're putting out a positive message here to talk about it. But some of our age groups, solidly in Gen X, we grew up in a time where whatever mental health issue you had, you kept it to yourself. Yeah. You were out there
suffering in silence.
You know, this is a generation of people who walk themselves from home and legit worried about nuclear war every other 10 minutes, right? Like it was an intense time around certain things, and there were a lot less elements of dialogue, public images of people embracing vulnerability, having experiences of healing with mental illness. It just wasn't the same language now. And so, for my friends that age and older, they can be in a place of bitterness about like watching younger generations be more open to this, right? And we're seeing this bear out. Millennial, couples having children, they're parenting different and hopefully in better ways. They're also having less kids. There's a whole dynamic here of how we're shifting in terms of how families are, structured and the support that's given to them. And these are good things. And depending on your level of like age and bitterness, you might judge it. And we're asking people to talk about it, to think about it, and remember that arc you're talking about. That education leads to some level of understanding, but ultimately that understanding leads to safety. Right. And that's the goal, is to get from where you are without knowing and not quite understanding why somebody's going through that difficult thing, and not countering their disclosure of sadness with, I've never felt that way, because that's never made anyone feel good. Right. That we can understand, and it can end up with safety. So final thoughts for today.
Final thoughts are just have the humility. Be intentional about your language. Be intentional about the way that you're interacting with someone who might be having a challenge or an experience. And do what you can to be kind. And even when you don't fully understand the concepts, that shouldn't have any bearing on the way that you show up for that person. So just recognizing that there's more than one way to help someone take care of their mental health.
Excellent. And to that, I'll just add a reminder that your words build worlds. How we talk, how we use language, how we describe things builds a whole world that exists only in here. And parts of it can be shared in a society and a culture, and we do that collectively. So as we modify how we talk and address things, we have the ability to change the way our society functions. And so there's a lot of power there. There's a lot of opportunity. So on that note, that's our episode today, Mental Health Month for May, on stigma and its impacts on free arts. Thanks. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Canvas of the Heart. We'd love to hear your questions and feedback by email at hello@freeartsaz.org. You can find more information about free arts by visiting our website at freeartsaz.org. We'd like to thank the many individual and corporate donors and the hundreds of volunteers that make free arts programs possible. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.